Doug, thank you for taking a minute out today. I appreciate it.
Hey, the honor is mine. The pleasure is mine. So here we go.
Let's do it. So, I want to begin with this question. Six
Yeah.
years ago, this pandemic changed the world, brought us all to a proverbial fork in the road. How did you get through that era, and how has it changed the way that you work and do things today?
Well, that really prompted us all to sort of look within, which is at that point in time, I was just getting going on the research for this book. And so I had much more time than I expected to research all these emotions. And again, very, very few people in history have done what I've done. In fact, probably nobody, which is remarkable given the wealth of psychologists and neuroscientists in the world. Nobody's really put together a dictionary of emotions. I had the time quietly to do it, and I spent several thousand hours at the end putting it all together.
So, talk to me a little bit about. I want to get to the heart and soul of the work that you're doing, and I'm going to put you in front of 13-year-olds at career day. One of the kids wants to know what you do for a living. How do you synthesize what your work to make sense to their brains?
Thanks. So I'm a researcher. I'm a professional researcher. So I had a long corporate career digging into very, very complex problems. I ended up getting hired by some of the top law firms in the country to help them with their complex, high stakes business disputes. So I'm a professional researcher. I'm comfortable being thrown into a complex situation and having a reasonably short time to figure it out. And so, in a way, I'm sort of a scientist. I'm not technically trained that way, but I am professional researcher.
So, what did you want to be when you were a kid? What was your dream job?
I wanted to go into finance, which is what I did do. So I became a bank president very early and morphed from that into the merger and acquisition business, where I became head of finance for what's now the largest private company in LA. I sort of followed that interest in banking and finance, but I learned in the private equity finance arena that I was really good at digging into things. The CEO in the next office, my boss said, you know what, you can get to the bottom of something really quickly. And that was quite a compliment. I thrived in that. You know, you put me in a city, asked me to figure out whether we should buy a company or not, and I was in my element. I really, really enjoyed it.
So, I'm curious. Take me back to your roots. What were the seeds that were planted into you that gave you this unique mix of finance and companies and knowing this and science? How did this happen?
Thank you. I'm the youngest of four boys, and I'm a fourth generation commercial banker. So all the conversations at the dinner table with my father, grandparent, whatever, were all about finance. I just sort of knew that I was going to gravitate that way. My brothers used to tease me that I would walk into banks when we visited a different city, and I said, "Well, I just feel comfortable here." And they said, "Well, what kind of nerd are you?" I'm very comfortable with financial records and digging into things. And I think my record, Joe, reflects that I'm an okay leader. I mean, I've led several companies. I seem to be able to execute on things. But in my heart of hearts, as I've gotten a little bit older, it's intensely fun for me to come across new information that is life changing. And in the course of several thousand hours, I think somewhere between 8, maybe 9,000 hours of research on this book over almost 10 years, the number of times I came across a quote from somebody that was jaw dropping, that literally on that spot changed my life hundreds of times. There are between 4 and 8,000 quotes within the book that I've assembled from various thought leaders from around the world over 2,500 years. The number of times, Joe, that I literally jaw dropped and went, my God, if I'd known that when I was 25, I would have lived an entirely different life. And so, having done the research and having collated the quotes attached to these different emotions, uh, I can help people, and I can help people in a way that they wouldn't ordinarily just stumble across. Nobody has ever defined emotions as I have through the quotes of really experienced people. So, for example, a very frequent question that people ask is, "Am I wrong to feel this way? I mean, am I the first person to feel this way?" Oh, you'd be surprised at how many people in life have suffered, and you'd be really amazed at some of the very insightful things they say about it. For example, whether it's suffering or grief or happier emotions like empathy or charisma or curiosity or wonder or zeal. the number of times that I've come across quotes that were just stunning. And I thought, this will help people. This will give them a leg up. If you've ever felt alone, if you're writing a paper, if you're trying to create something new and you have a view in your life that, gee, am I alone in thinking this? Uh, well, chances are you're not. If you look at each of the 272 different emotions that I've explained in the book, uh, you will be just simply amazed, and often extremely entertained by what really great minds have said. And they don't have to be scientists. They could be artists. They could be actors. They could be politicians. They could be the guy at the corner restaurant. The number of insightful things that in one or two sentences that you'll read, it's really remarkable.
And I think that's the beauty of this podcasting world I run into every day is there's so many wonderful people that are doing extraordinary work, and we all have the capacity to learn and to absorb these revelatory pieces, quotes, these insights. And it's amazing that you've been able to collate and put all of this together and kind of label the emotions.
Well, thank you. Exactly. So, there's a story with how it developed, but what I found is that emotions are often the most used but least defined aspects of our lives. And I have to be careful the way I say that, the most used but least defined. And so when I went about this process of defining emotions, I thought, well, gee, there must be hundreds of psychologists and neuroscientists who've done this. And the answer to that is it's extremely uncommon, extremely rare, even for advanced scientists and thought leaders to define emotions. And I thought, how odd. We use emotions every day. You would think that the great minds, whether it's Carl Jung or Sigmund Freud or some of the great psychologists of the 20th century, would have easily done this. Well, no, they haven't. If you pick up a book at Barnes and Noble or your favorite bookstore or online and flip to a glossary, you'll often find there is no glossary, that they simply don't define it. And I thought, how remarkable that hasn't happened. And when I completed the book, 376 pages, 272 emotions, 8,000 quotes. I had completed it and published it in January, and a friend of mine was looking at an early version of it, and he said, well, this is really fascinating. Why don't you submit it to AI? And I said, well, why, thank you, but I don't want AI. I mean, this is purely human estimates of and definitions of what emotions are. And he said, no. You've already done it, but why not submit it to AI and see what AI thinks, maybe suggestions. Well, Joe, I had a moment of truth there. Do I really want to submit 130,000 words for criticism? And you can appreciate that I might have hesitated before I pressed, connect to Claude AI or Chat GPT, but I thought, you know what? I'm really confident in this book. And so I pressed send, and 3 minutes later, both Chat GPT and Claude AI responded, this is the single most comprehensive reference on emotions in the English language. And it took my breath away. That wasn't what I expected by a mile. I
Yeah.
thought for sure others have done similar work. And I typed back into each of them on two different laptops. I said, thank you for the cheerleading, but I really want an honest estimation. And they said, no, this is not cheerleading. This is, without a doubt, the single most comprehensive consumer-facing reference on emotions in the English language. And I was really surprised. And so the book is done well on Amazon and elsewhere. And I think there's a need for it. It is remarkable how many times you will laugh out loud when you read some of the quotes from people in history who've experienced curiosity or parenthood or empathy or resentment or forgiveness. Uh, what I've learned and what is very consistent with the science is that emotions are really navigational. We talk about, how did you navigate that relationship? How did you navigate that job? How did you navigate that boss? Well, we use the word navigation, but we almost forget what we're navigating. We are navigating with our emotions. I mean, that's how we navigate. So, said maybe more cleanly, Emotions help us navigate away from bad stuff. They will help us navigate away from somebody who's angry or aggressive or, uh, a bully. Just for an example, we navigate away from bad stuff and we navigate toward good stuff. Love, excitement, interest, enthusiasm, wonder, joy, zeal. But it's our emotions that allow us to navigate that. And that is very, very consistent with the state of the art from neuroscience at the moment. So we talk about navigation, but it is through emotions that we actually do navigate.
So, who's been your inspirational force in your life? Who's allowed you to navigate from your career beginnings to where you're at now, your true place with the book and with what you're doing to help people channel their emotions and understand them? Who has been that for you?
Uh, since I was a child, even though I was kind of a nerd in many respects, I have had an uncommon attachment to emotions. I cry very easily. I mean, I've had a succession of girlfriends before I was married, of course, who would say, "My gosh, for a guy, you get emotional really easy," and it wasn't angry emotions, but I really I emote. I mean, my parents said, you cry easier than any of our other sons. I read a quote during the course of researching the book. From Meryl Streep, the famous actor, actress, however you want to describe her. She's obviously won 4 Academy Awards, which puts her in a tie with Katharine Hepburn for the most Academy Awards in history. And her quote was a couple of them that I'll share with you. She said, "My mother told me when I was small that I could do anything, and I believed her." That was quote number one from Meryl Streep. Well, look what happened with her life. Quote number two, both of them are in the book, was whatever is most unusual about you, focus on that because that's probably your truest gift. All right. So when I was a kid and I found that I was easy to cry, I would really get into things, and my brothers would sometimes tease me about it. I tended to suppress that. I tended to suppress, whether it was brotherly, friendly criticism or not. I thought, maybe being so emotional isn't very helpful. Um, and I suppressed it. All right. Well, so as I got older and I've had some successes, some fairly meaningful successes in the business world, I was still attracted to it. I had a succession of bosses, one of whom, founded the largest private company in LA, and I was in the next office. I saw him as an executive more as an emotional master than as a business master. I mean, truthfully, he's both, but his ability to motivate people was utterly uncommon. And I realized that I was learning really two things in that job, one of which was helping to acquire companies around the world, which took a fair amount of financial expertise. But I was learning from a motivational master. My goodness, this man was extraordinary. And so, there was that benefit. And then I realized, you know what, maybe, just maybe the most important thing I'm learning here is not finance, and I was making pretty decent contribution, of course, but it was more about emotions. So I'm giving you a fairly lengthy response, but I realized that the focal point of my life, the passion of my life, was really what motivates us, and emotions do, and they help us to navigate. It's Joe, it's pretty uncommon for people to understand that emotions are how we navigate. As you well know, people often are embarrassed by their emotions. They want to hide from their emotions, or, gee, I shouldn't feel this way. Yes, you should. They're all gifts, the good ones and the bad ones. They're all gifts. They steer you away from bad things and they steer you toward good things. And in the moment you realize that they are all helpful, even the bad ones. I mean, how could grief be helpful? It's so sad. How could anxiety or depression be helpful? They're leading you away from something, and then your curiosity and your wonder and your interest are leading you toward other things. And the moment you realize that they're there as your friends to help you navigate, I think your life changes. I think it changes subtly and very powerfully. Emotions represent our operating system. Just like your desktop has a main drive and peripherals that assemble information and they percolate on it and they issue commands. Our emotions are the biological equivalent of a computer operating system, and it's really helpful to know that,
Yeah, certainly.
to come to that realization.
I think even on a human level, when people talk, it's that idea of therapy, so to speak, quasi or real therapy. Whenever anybody can get their emotions and they can get off their chest what they're thinking, it just makes you feel better about your life, about feeling connected. There is just that idea of just being connected to your emotions and how you're feeling. Because yeah, there's a lot of things that people don't feel comfortable with or they feel ashamed, and it's been something that's been conditioned in us societally and otherwise throughout our lives.
That's beautifully said. I'm going to add to that that in the course of my research, I decided to investigate, um, I think ultimately 19 different academic fields, and they could be the obvious ones, which would be psychology and neuroscience, but they extended into physics, nuclear physics, uh, acting, literature, you name it. There are 19 academic disciplines, and all of the thought leaders in all of the disciplines, both the arts and the sciences, all of the thought leaders agree that words are how we solve problems. It is through talking, as you just mentioned a moment ago. It is talking, getting something off your chest. Well, uh, here are two things that may surprise you, which is arguably the top neuroscientists, top two or three in the world, include uh, a PhD, of course, who teaches at Northeastern University in Boston. Her name is Lisa Feldman Barrett. And if you don't know who Lisa Feldman Barrett is, she is a best-selling writer on top of being a brilliant clinician. So she has a team of people helping her do her clinical work. She came up with a quote that to me is extremely powerful, but is prefaced. She is one of the top 1/10 of 1% most quoted scientists in the world. So if you haven't heard her name, the scientific community knows her extremely well. Her quote about the importance of words, of expressing yourself, expressing your emotions is this one. It is the more finely grained your vocabulary, the more precisely your brain can construct emotion. How many times, Joe, in your and my life have we had trouble articulating how we feel? You go, I'm not really sure how I feel. All right. Another top neuroscientist in the world is named Dan Siegel. He is a psychiatrist affiliated with UCLA, also a best-selling author. He articulated this issue of putting words to emotions. I'm going to say it again. Putting words to emotions is the way to become happy. That's a bold claim, but it's amply supported. So Dan Siegel, 5 words to cast in stone: name it to tame it. He did a ton of clinical work in association with UCLA through what's known as functional magnetic resonance imaging, fMRI. They did work on hundreds and hundreds of people, he and other neuroscientists and psychiatrists as he is. They found that when you can name an emotion, attach words to the way you feel, your emotional system is measurably much calmer.
Yeah.
So they did a before and after. If you could attach words to your emotions, you're going to be calmer. You're going to be happier. Name it to tame it. It's such a simple rhyme, and yet it describes just what Lisa Feldman Barrett has said and what Antonio Damasio and any of the other top neuroscientists in the world, they all say the same thing. If you can put it in words, you're going to be happier. You're going to be more in command of your life. So words are how we solve problems. I'll add one of the other 19 fields of academic endeavor is engineering. You may, Joe, have heard of the Sloan Kettering Clinic in New York City, one of the top anti-cancer clinics in the world. The named benefactor of Sloan Kettering Clinic is Kettering, Charles Kettering. He was not a physician. He was an engineer, and he spent his career working for General Motors as their chief of engineering and development. Well, he made a fortune and he ended up contributing a lot of it to create this cancer clinic, but he was a masterful problem solver. So here is Charles Kettering. It's 100 years ago. This guy had 186 patents. He knew how to solve problems. And he came up with a quote that to me is another one of those extremely memorable ones. A problem well stated is a problem half solved.
Yeah.
Well, the minute you hear it, you know, of course that's right. And
Yeah.
yet here it was Charles Kettering 100 years ago who, you know, 7, 8, 9 words, a problem well stated is a problem half solved. Here's another quote from a nuclear theoretical physicist named Niels Bohr, Bohr. It's a Danish name, but he was a colleague of Albert Einstein. Here's his quote. What is it that we human beings ultimately depend upon? We depend on our words. We are suspended in language. You might think that a theoretical physicist rather, you might think that a guy of that caliber would think in terms of square root symbols
Yeah.
and equations, and to a degree they do, but those are all substitutes for words. All of the leaders in all of these fields, William Shakespeare from Hamlet, suit the action to the words and the words to the action. It is all about reducing your problems to words. So if I may, and you know, I'm rambling on a bit, so apologies, but
You're fine.
uh, let's imagine for a moment, Joe, that you're a therapist and I'm your patient. And I come to see you. It's the first time I've ever visited you. And you say, well, have a seat there, Doug. You know, what's troubling you? Which, you know, you would expect that you would say. And let's say because I'm embarrassed or because I just don't have a great emotional vocabulary, I start to stammer and I go, well, Joe, you know, or doctor, well, you know, my problem is and I'm searching for words and I blurt out, I'm anxious all the time. That's it. My problem is I'm anxious all the time. So I worry about things. Well, you're my therapist, and you quickly make a mental note that Doug is anxious. It's anxiety. That's his problem. But what happens if that's not really my problem? What happens is I was just too embarrassed to tell you what was really on my mind, and I blurted out the word anxious. What if the real problem, Joe, is perhaps I'm addicted, and I don't mean addicted to drugs. I could be addicted to bubble gum. I mean, I could be addicted to watching ESPN. You know, the phenomenon is the same. You're using something to escape from something else.
Yeah.
But what if the real problem isn't anxiety or anxiousness? It's addiction. Well, that's an entirely different issue for you as my therapist to help me solve, right? What the book does, which has never been done before, is you go alphabetically 272 different emotions, and each of those emotions is covered by 20 to 30 quotes from people who've experienced it before. So if you're having trouble articulating what you're thinking in your inner voice, you can look down a page and go, wait a minute, number 7, that's exactly the way I feel.
Mhm.
Or maybe it's not that emotion at all, and you flip to a different page about a different emotion that might be similar. And you go, that's it. Well, suddenly you and I are making progress. You're my therapist. You really know what the problem is. I really know what the problem is. I now have the words to describe it, and then we can move forward.
So if you could interview one person alive on the planet right now that you find fascinating, that you would love to tap into, as someone that's interviewed a plethora for your book, who would you love to interview?
Well, there are two. One of them is a so-called artist, a writer named Walt Whitman, who has lived in the 1800s. His facility for words is so remarkable. I think in some circles he's regarded as the poet laureate of America. He was not the poet laureate, but he's often referred to that way. He is, along with Mark Twain, one of the premier writers in American history. There are a few others, but he's certainly on the short list. His ability to describe emotions in really succinct words is so powerful. So, for example, one of his quotes, many of them are included in the book, but he was asked about love. What is love? And he paused and he responded, what is love? We were together, I forget the rest. What a beautiful way to
Yeah.
describe the emotion of love.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, so here's a man. He didn't use the word love in his definition. He used other words to describe it. Well, if you've ever been in love, I presume you probably have.
Yeah,
Yeah, I have too. And the minute I read that, I thought back to a wonderful relationship I'd had earlier in my life. We were together, I forget everything else.
yeah,
Well, that's a beautiful way of phrasing it. So number one would be Walt Whitman. Number two would be Albert Einstein. And
yeah,
and I had no expectation before I undertook the research that a theoretical physicist, arguably the greatest scientist in world history, perhaps after Isaac Newton, or certainly in that league, I had no idea that Albert Einstein would be so insightful as to the human condition.
yeah.
Uh, here's a man who we all think of as this marvelous thinker, this theoretical physicist. The quotes he had about the human condition were very powerful. So, for example, emotionally, he said, "Don't let your brain get in the way of your heart." Well, what a beautiful thing to say, right? I mean, you would expect him to think, well, it's only your head that matters. No, no, no. He was very, very insightful about what it means to be human. And he uttered, in my view, Joe, as many brilliant insights about what it's like to be human as he did in the scientific world.
I agree. So let me ask you this. If you had a dream tonight, you ran into the 18-year-old version of you, you walked into a room and there was a film projector and you click play and a 60-second highlight reel of the life you've lived came up on the wall. Would that young version of you believe your life turned out this way?
At a very, very deep level, yes, but I was so convinced that I had to uh, deny my emotional interests at a young age. I mean, if your brothers tell you enough times, you learn to zip it. Um, and my brothers are fine men, but I suppressed who I really was in this interest in emotions. It was a long and winding route for me to find that my truest passion is learning about emotions as motivators. Emotions are our operating system. They are our Rosetta Stone for behavior. Uh, you can't get through a day without experiencing hundreds of emotions. And Joe, the average person doesn't realize that. The average person, and there's no such thing as an average person, but collectively we can talk about that. The average person might say, well, last Tuesday I got angry that afternoon, and then Wednesday morning my boss was annoyed with me. And they might think that emotions are very segmented and far apart, that the rest of our lives we are really rational. It's only occasionally that we slip into emotions like anger or whatever else. The reality is very, very, very different from that. From the top scientists in the world, and I'm talking about Nobel laureates, Dr. Daniel Kahneman from Princeton, Nobel winner, Antonio Damasio won the Honda Award. All of them agree that emotions are primary. They're not secondary to reason and logic. So if you, Joe, or your audience have a thought that, gee, when I'm at my best, I'm purely rational and logical, that's not true. Whether that's a vestige of the Star Trek show years ago, which we all laugh about, where Mr. Spock was annoyed by these pesky humans and their emotions, you may think, or you may have come to the conclusion that emotions are inferior to logic. The science is 100% that without your emotional system, you cannot process or value facts.
Yeah.
Emotions are primary to uh, reason. Reason is secondary to emotion. And most people have that backwards. The moment you understand that your emotions should not be suppressed, that they are how you experience wonder and joy, then you're really onto something. And it's purely supported by the science at the very highest level.
So in that 60-second highlight reel, when you look back on your life, what are you the happiest about?
I'm happiest about discovering finally what my truest passion is. And the good Lord gave me a number of aptitudes. I'm pretty good at finance, so it was not surprising that I might veer there because of my family lineage. But the greatest joy of my life is understanding that emotions are primary. When I read that and I confirmed it with multiple Nobel level scientists, and I thought, my God, I suspected it my whole life. And there it is. I'm finally reading it. that was a pretty happy night, Joe, for me
Yeah.
when I realized that the science supports what I had sort of known in my heart all of my life.
So at the end of the day, Doug, everyone has a perception of you. Family, friends, everyone you work with, everyone that gets your book, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I think I've been given a gift by accident. I've been given a gift because of an exchange I had with my daughter at dinner where she asked if I could help her with depression. This is now 8, 10 years ago. She was having a bout of depression as a sophomore in high school. That's what prompted me in this. So it was an accidental discovery at dinner that prompted me to do investigation into depression. And 10 years later, it went from depression to 272 different emotions. I am thrilled. I don't even have euphoric, perhaps, to have finally gotten on track with something that I can't wait to get up in the morning to dig into further. And I have almost accidentally been given the opportunity to do what the leading psychologists and neuroscientists of the world haven't done, which is to create an emotionary, which is the hybrid word we came up with. It's not a dictionary because it's really entertaining. It's fun to read. Um, an emotionary. If you feel that you are experiencing something that, why me? Why did this happen to me? And you read what people you would never in your life imagine have experienced that emotion, what they've said, suddenly you have aha moments. And those aha moments where you put what you're sort of ruminating on in your head and your heart, when you see how they've been put into words by somebody else, you get a release. You experience psychologically a release. You are a much happier person.
So if you could get into a time machine and go back in the annals of human history and see one event with your own eyes, what would you love to have seen happen?
Gosh, what a wonderful question. I would love to have seen uh, some of the plays of William Shakespeare. Uh, you and I think of Shakespeare as a man who lived 400 years ago, but he was the first writer in history. Chaucer, perhaps a little bit earlier than Shakespeare, but Shakespeare was the first writer to express emotions in common terms. So you and I use words like slang and street talk. He was the first to do it in writing. He included street talk. The green-eyed monster of envy was his term. We use it every day. Good riddance. Did you know that the term good riddance came from William
I
Shakespeare?
didn't. Oh,
Well, think about it. The term good riddance, which people around the world use today, 400 years later, he was the author of it.
yeah.
And it simply says, you know what, I don't like this scene, I don't like you, and I'll be glad when you're in my rear view, right? Good riddance. It so resonates with people. His use of popular terms, which we might call street language or slang, he was the first to do it.
Yeah.
And his audiences loved it. His audience flipped over it. He was a master of emotional language, and so I'm a huge fan.
So if anybody wants to pick up a copy of Choosing Emotions, delve into your world, your work, any of the good business, where do they go?
The book's name is Choosing Emotions: Thinking with Your Head and Acting with Your Heart. It's available on in paperback, hardback, Kindle, on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Ingram Spark, a lot of places. The website is choosingemotions.com. Social media, we're available. We're posting virtually daily at Choosing Emotions. It is a joy to read, and the number of times that you will read a quote from somebody and laugh out loud, it's a lot.
Yeah.
Humor is a wonderful release. It's a wonderful introduction. I came up, Joe, with one of my own quotes. I added over time, over 9 years. I found that a few of my own quotes were worthy, so I included a few of them here and there. And one of them is this: if you can laugh at an emotion, it does not control you.
Yeah.
If you can laugh at an emotion, it does not control you. So whether you're frustrated or angry or whatever, if you can sort of step outside yourself and say, you know what, there I am, I'm getting angry again, and you can laugh at it, suddenly that emotion does not control you. And I think I've made a few contributions here and there to helping people.
What a wonderful insight. What a wonderful look into your world, the book, Choosing Emotions. Thank you, Doug. Thank you so much for taking a minute out today. You are definitely bringing plenty of light and wonder to the world. I appreciate it. It's been so good to talk to you, get to know you.
A joy being with you, Jay. Thank you, Joe, for having me.
You bet. And